Adam Leech here, continuing my video series for the S.M.A.K Museum in Ghent, Belgium, where I am the resident artist. And we are in pretty deep into this discussion about an artwork that I'm making. And so if you haven't seen the previous videos, I recommend you go back and have a look at those. So I'm just going to dive in, and hopefully you can stay with me. So, as you know, we have the condition of the viewer in the museum looking at a work of art. This is an important concept I'm holding on to. The other one is the hard problem of consciousness. And finally, I'm making a work of art. I'm sketching it out here. That's what I'm doing. So, one thing I know is this, that the painting itself is going to be long and skinny, horizontal, and in keeping with the hard problem of consciousness, this painting is going to basically ask the question, how does the brain produce the mind over here? That's the sort of fundamental question. And in my previous video, I sketched out a very rough sketch. And from that sketch, I basically slept on it, thought about it, let it simmer in my subconscious, and began to think symbolically, which is what you do when you're making art. It's natural, it's normal. So, at some moment I decided that here in the brain part, we're going to have the trunk of a tree with roots, and standing next to the tree, a figure, a person. Those are his feet, and these are his legs. Here's the tree. Let me stop you right there. We have colors: red, cadmium red, cobalt blue, cadmium yellow, and green, which is made of mixing blue and yellow. We also have what's called ceramic white, which is a transparent white, which is used for mixing with color. Okay. Tree with roots, the feet of a human, representing symbolically the brain. Up here, the mind, the continuation of this tree, something like this, and the continuation of the figure, the human, something like this. Now there's probably a question entering your mind, which is, why is this horizontal? Good question. I'm not going to answer that yet. Be patient. We have some connection between the brain, symbolically speaking here, and the mind up here. Now, for the mind we need color. This is perhaps the sky. Very beautiful. Perhaps the horizon is quite low, so we can actually have some sky all the way down here. We can have fruit in our tree, lemons, no problem. We can have flowers growing up next to the figure and next to the tree. Flowers oftentimes are read. Now don't forget that question. What is this? So, this is what my subconscious developed in relationship to this question of the hard problem of consciousness. And as I was developing this stayed in my mind, and I didn't know what it meant. And so I began to do some reading and some thinking about the philosopher David Chalmers and this question of the hard problem. And I also began to look into another philosopher with the name of Joseph Levine, and he has responded to David Chalmers about this issue of the hard problem of consciousness with talking about something called the explanatory gap. Now, the explanatory gap is essentially making the claim that no matter how close you can bring the physical reality of the brain to the experience of the mind, there will always be a gap between these two things. And that is called the explanatory gap. And for me, what's amazing about this is I came up with this idea before I knew of this philosophy. It somehow had stuck with me intuitively. And it's such a nice feeling when you have an intuition about how your experience is in the world, and then it's somehow validated by other people. So in this case, it's the philosopher Joseph Levine. So here is my more formalized sketch of the painting. At this point, I think the title of the painting might be something like the gap. The gap. Now, one last thing, and that is, why is this horizontal? The reason it's horizontal is so that the viewer, remember, this whole thing is about the condition of the viewer. The viewer is intended to experience this part of the painting, the gap. And so when you go to the museum and see this painting in the real, what you can look at and contemplate is this empty space.